In a perfect world, I would love to have rules tailor made to every facility to say, to make sure we're running each facility as optimally as possible. But the reality is that's 32 sets of rules that my customer service team would then have to remember, right?
Welcome back to the Self Storage Lab. Today, we're chatting with Faraz Hemani, founder and CEO of Iron Storage and co-founder of Pebble Ridge Capital. Let's get into it. Faraz, it's been a long time coming. Did we meet at I'm trying to think actually. I feel like we met at either one of the shows or maybe one of the tenant shows early on. Have you ever been to
Yeah,
the
I think it was a
Idaho one?
show or something like that. We've
Okay,
spoke so many times between then and now, it's hard to remember, but I do remember catching you at a show.
nice. Well, either way, really pumped to have you. Self Storage Lab, where we get to nerd out with operators and other folks in the industry about, honestly, your processes, tech, and all that. Always digged your background coming from big tech into storage. So excited to dive into all that. So let's get it started.
I'll kick it off with where you
Yeah.
just went. I'm curious. I think it's like hard for most people to imagine being at Google, making a really nice salary and then having this like conviction in your stomach that says, "Nah, this ain't for me." So maybe we just start with that. Like, what gave you the conviction to make the leap into going to build your own thing?
Yeah, no, that's a very real thing. The first 18, 24 months after I left, probably at least a few times a week, I woke up and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Like this is such a dumb decision. I hope my wife's not gonna kill me. So yeah, it's very real. It's not easy to, give up not just, the salary and all that, but like the reality is big tech jobs, a lot of the stereotypes are right. It's a comfortable, cushy job, you're not grinding too hard. It is a hard thing to give up, and there's a whole career path laid out for you, just stay there for 10, 15 years and you're going to make a lot of money in that industry. But I think a few things happened. One, I was always doing real estate on the side in a really small, limited fashion throughout my career in tech. I was buying single family houses. I was really lucky that, it was a point in the market where housing did really well. I sold a bunch of properties. I made more money in one check than I ever have. And I was like, oh my God, it was a super exciting moment for me and kind of probably rode that momentum to just say, yeah, you know what? I don't need Google. I don't need a W-2 job anymore. I can just do this on my own. And I'm glad that I had that momentum and it pushed me. But also, I think just a sense of I want to go and try this. If I become 40 or 50 years old and I never went out and tried to build something on my own, would I have that regret or would I have that feeling like I would never know what I was capable of? And I said, made the decision, I'd rather try it and fall on my ass and at least know that I can't do it rather than go through the rest of my life wondering what if. And I know it sounds corny, but that was a real motivation for me. That's how I broke my decision down. My worst case, I fail. I come to my manager, beg for my job back. Best case, it's awesome and everything works out.
That's awesome. Yeah, to use another big tech company's way of making decisions, you knew the door was a two-way door, right? There's a little bit of comfort in being like, hey, I succeeded at Google as a PM. Like if I really need to fall back, I could probably come back to maybe not Google, but some other big tech company and do that. I actually want to go like one step a little bit further back and just I think it's always interesting, people that have the ambition and the drive to take the leap of faith, initially, there's probably something in their upbringing that brings them to that. So I'm kind of curious, how did your upbringing, maybe your family, shape how you think about money, risk, ownership, etc.?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I'm first generation born in the US. My parents were born in Pakistan. My dad immigrated here in the 80s to get an education. My mom came shortly after when they got married. So growing up in an immigrant household, oftentimes I see it go one of two ways, right? There's a lot of people that have come from other countries like Pakistan. They come from nothing. And for them, that's a risk on point of view. I've got nothing to lose. For some people, like I would say my father's in that camp, they come with nothing. They manage to scrape together a little something and they are totally risk averse. And they're like, I am not doing, I'm not in a position to go venture out or try a business. It is all about putting food on the table for my family. My father definitely fell into that camp, but I learned a ton from that kind of mentality as well, right? So growing up, it was always save money, invest wisely, invest in risk averse positions. My dad, if they wrote a book about Dave Ramsey's probably written that book, right? But it's like over 20, 30 years, how to get, build wealth slowly and do it in the most risk-free, correct way. Like my father followed that to a T, saved money, pinched every penny, paid his mortgage off as early as he could, put everything else into Vanguard ETFs. And it just taught me a lot, at least about what's the right way to think about money and what's the proper way to think about risk. At least gave me an opinion on that. I know there's a lot of people who maybe don't even get exposed to thinking about anything on terms of risk or finances or managing money and et cetera. So I at least had that perspective. What I think I was really, really lucky, and a lot of immigrant and first generation Americans would relate to this. My father put us in a position where, hey, our college was paid for. I didn't come out of school with any student debt, right? And I was in a position where and I could get a job at a company like a big tech company, start making a big salary, not have to worry about paying off loans, et cetera. And it put me in a position where maybe I could take a little more risk than he could. And even thinking about it further, really, it's a really important topic to me because it's like generations are interconnected. His father was the first one in our family history to go get educated, period. That put my father in a better position to go out to America and get his education here, which put me in a position to take a little more risk than they could. It's going to put my kids in a position to continue to build that platform even more and more and more. So I definitely owe a lot to kind of just the lineage and where, the way even my father thought about things.
That's beautiful, man. We definitely stand on the shoulders, right? And it's awesome, the progression, to hear the progression of your family as they came to the States and, truly lived, are going after the American dream, et cetera. I know you also started experimenting in, real estate pretty early on. Maybe let's dive into why real estate? Like what was your first rental property or thing that you started to dabble in, and how did you get into storage?
Yeah, first property, I was probably 21, 22 years old. I was in a tech sales job at the time, was doing pretty well, got my first quarterly bonus. It was like $10,000, $12,000, which is more money than I'd ever seen in my whole life. That was more than I had in my whole bank account at the time. And I was lucky to have a manager at the time who invested in rental properties. He did that on the side. And me and him had a good relationship. And when I got that check, he's like, okay, before you go blow it on stupid things, let me give you another idea of something you could do with that check. You could go and buy a house for yourself, get out of your apartment. You're going to have 3 bedrooms, rent the other 2 out to your buddies and live rent free and make some money doing it. And to me, at that age, I'm like, I have no idea how to buy a house. It was just some daunting process. Like real estate is not for somebody my age. It's not something we do. So I was lucky to have a mentor to give me that push, but also guide me through the process. And once I did that first home and, the process just made sense and money was coming in and I could wrap my head around it, I think that's when I was hooked because real estate, especially, it's simple, it's straightforward, right? You buy a property, you have expenses, you have a mortgage, but you have income. Your profit is your revenue minus your expenses minus your debt. That's how much money you're making. It's super, super straightforward, right? I could wrap my head around that so much better than I could the stock market and why stocks go up and down and things like that. And so for me, then going forward, every bonus check that I was getting from that point on was going towards more houses, more real estate investments over the next few years.
That's incredible. Was that in Houston?
I was living in Austin at that time. So I went to school there and then I got
Nice.
really, really lucky. Yeah. So this was 2016, 2017, started building a portfolio of houses in Austin, which was a huge, huge stroke
That's
of luck
awesome.
for me.
That's crazy. And like even going that route, like you're saying, risk, right? Big leap for a lot of people. What was the reaction from friends or colleagues or family whenever you're like, hey, I'm going to close the door on this and actually go full on investing in real estate and whatnot?
Yeah, it was, honestly, surprisingly, ton of support. I got so many messages from other folks working. I was at Google at the time. So many other folks at Google and other companies I work at, people I hadn't even talked to in a couple of years messaged me with just, dude, that's so cool that you did this. You got out of corporate life and you started your own thing. And I've been wanting to do that for so long. And I think that's a pretty common theme. There's a lot of people that feel maybe either it's a dissatisfaction or they have an ambition to, hey, I think I could do more. And I think people really like it. It's receptive. People get inspired by seeing others, take that leap. And I got a ton of positive reception. I definitely had some family members as well. Like, dude, you're so stupid. What are you thinking? And I know even my own father, who I mentioned is a very, very risk averse person, for like the first 2 years after me leaving Google, he would just as jokingly just tell people like, oh yeah, my son, he's unemployed, doesn't do anything. But he's come around to it now. He supports
That's awesome.
it.
Heck yeah. After your portfolio, it's like, hey, Dad, look, that's awesome. That's awesome. And like, I'm kind of curious too, like just kind of going into like self-storage, just get that over with. But, I was reading during, obviously pandemic, I feel like that's when 2020 comes around, it hits, housing prices boom. Obviously, I read you liquidated a lot of your rental portfolio. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you set your eyes on storage. I was reading a little bit about you, and I love this line where you essentially were looking for an asset where value isn't set by the market, but by what the operator can do. So what you can do. It's like you're treating it as a startup, right? So taking that Silicon Valley mentality. Can you explain like what you meant by that? Obviously, correct me if I said anything in there wrong. And how self storage like fit the bill for that.
Yeah. So to get to that point, as you mentioned, right over, pre-COVID and right at the beginning of COVID as well, we're continuing to buy rental properties in Austin, Texas. Myself and I had one investor who was, a family friend, had bought these houses together. When the market went crazy and a lot of those houses went up almost, 2x in price from when we bought them, we decided to sell everything. We were left with a lot of cash, but we knew that it wasn't because we were so smart or we were so skilled that we made that money. That was pure luck. That was like a lottery ticket that was handed to us that, hey, we happen to be in the housing market, the one of, if not the top housing market in the country during one of the craziest housing booms in the last 20 years, and we were in the right place at the right time. That is not a strategy we can replicate. So we were thinking, what can we do to drive these kind of results again, but with a little more predictability? We can't bank on, these once in a lifetime events continuing to happen. So rather than put that money back into more houses where we know, hey, the possibility of getting the same return back is totally market dependent. Where can we have a little more control over the outcome? So the fact that honestly we got so lucky with the position that we were in to begin with made us realize that, hey, a lot of outcomes are the result of luck. And we don't want future outcomes to solely be based on luck. And that's where it got us thinking, where do we have a little more influence in what the outcome is? And that's where we kind of ventured, read about commercial real estate, read a lot of the same introductory books a lot of people read, understood the concept of NOI, cap rate, all of those things. And self-storage was particularly interesting because it is so operationally intensive. There are so many levers that you can pull to change revenue or to change expenses, in my opinion, more so than a lot of other commercial real estate asset classes. And that was an idea that we were drawn to. We want 100 different levers to play with, right? Because if we can get 70 or 80% of those levers right, then we have a lot of influence over the outcome of our investment. And so that was the biggest thing that drove us to that thesis, that we need to have more control over outcomes of our investments.
That's awesome. And are you guys like as you transition into storage, are you guys building or buying existing facilities? Like what's kind of or a little bit of both? What's kind of the model been?
In self-storage, we've only been buying existing facilities. So, we want to just focus on getting the operational side right. As a company, we have started doing construction in other asset classes, industrial, et cetera. But storage, it's strictly been about acquiring and adding value through operations.
That's awesome. And so I love diving into people's mental models. I'm curious, like you guys are looking at all these existing facilities. Like, what's the mental model you guys use to help filter good deals from distractions in the market?
It's a really good question. And honestly, it's changed so much over the last few years because the storage market has totally changed. I'm sure that's a topic we may talk about soon. But for us, it's exactly what we said earlier, right? Hey, we want to focus on places where we drive a lot of control over the outcome. That means to us, there's a few operational levers that we have to feel confident we're going to be able to push. So as a mental model, we're thinking about, first of all, markets that we're looking at. Hey, does this market or given city or geography give us enough runway for us to push that lever to the maximum? Is there enough demand? Are there enough people? Is there a willingness to pay certain amounts of rent? We want to look at who we're up against, who we're competing against. Do we feel like we're going to be able to push our levers further than those other operators are going to push their levers, right? If we're going up against a public storage or extra space, hey, maybe we need to be honest with ourselves that we are not going to be able to execute at the same level on some of those operational levers as they will. And we need to know that going in. So strength of the market, strength of competitors, and then when you kind of narrow it down to the bottom of that funnel, then strength of that individual asset. What is the location? What does it look like? What is the tenant composition and mix? So I think at a high level, those are the three things that we can use to quickly screen that, is this something we're even going to be interested in, right? And all of it is from a lens of what is the runway that we have on each one of our levers that we really want to push on.
So once like 2022, 2023 hit, I feel like the secret was out, right? Maybe I'm a little bit off there, but it's definitely harder right now to buy. A lot of people are there's a lot of people coming, either taking over their family's portfolio or coming from another industry, trying to modernize it, etc. Like nowadays, like how do you compete and win? And maybe that's alluding to this, your mental model here, right? Like I'm assuming so if you're acquiring, you're talking to sellers. Is it more leaning towards like personal touch? Is it putting on that sales hat? Better data? Is it all the above? Like how do you win nowadays?
Yeah. No, I mean, you're so right. And you nailed a really important point we were just discussing actually earlier, that there are different entrants and different players in storage today than there were even 2 or 3 years ago, right? Like you mentioned, there's a lot of people that are coming from other industries, or there's a lot of maybe second generation storage owners who are not going to do the same things as the first generation did. 2 or 3 years ago, the common discussion in our industry, at least in the level that I play in, was the playbook is go find a mom and pop facility anywhere in the country, throw a website on there, run some Google ads, raise rents 30%, and you're going to win. And, honestly, right around COVID and after that, that worked. As simple as it sounded, worked. And I think that's what generated a lot of buzz and excitement in the industry that, hey, it's so simple. Then this is the playbook to win. And to find these deals, it was as simple as just call people that own storage facilities and ask them if they want to sell. But everything is cyclical, right? So people, that playbook got pushed, I think, so hard by so many people and so many new entrants that today it doesn't work. You can't just slap a website on and say, now I've added value. That's just table stakes today, right? And most markets, even small markets, operators are getting sharper, or we have new people coming into these markets and new operators coming in that know how to operate a business the way the way a business should run in 2025, right? It's not enough to just say I'm present on Google and I run ads and I do revenue management. Everybody does that now. That's not enough to win. And on the acquisition side, it's not so simple as pick up the phone and call an owner, because that's what everyone did now for the last 3 years. Hey, you do that today and you're going to say, hey, you're going to get the response, you're the fifth person that called me this week. So I think it's a good thing for our industry that it's not so easy to come in and win anymore. It does require a lot more thought, a lot, better execution than it probably ever did in the last 3-4 years. And so that changes the, as we were talking about, the mental model. What now constitutes a good deal, knowing I can't just slap lipstick on it from an operational perspective and make a ton of money. It requires much, much more thoughtfulness and much more diligent execution. And same thing on the acquisition side. Hey, I can't just pick up the phone, call 100 people and hopefully land a deal out of that. It requires a lot more thoughtful execution in terms of market selection, research, how I am going and approaching an owner, or how I'm interacting with brokers. So I think the whole thing is just, it's not easy to win anymore, but the people that are spending time on execution are going to keep winning.
All right, so we're getting to the fun stuff then.
Dude, I'm so riled up to nerd out right now. We've just set the stage for all the things that are right in our wheelhouse to sit
go.
there. And yeah, I know. It's all right, time to go.
So, all right, a lot of this is now just a lot of avenues in my brain now. But so from what I know of you, obviously conversations in the past, what I research about you, et cetera, but you coming from big tech and kind of how you've approached building this portfolio, and we'll talk about remote management and your playbook here in a bit. But what is interesting to me right now is I'm categorizing you as a it's go to market or growth, or growth hacker, right? Growth hacker is in the tech space. It's an old term now, but it's essentially finding avenues using data and behaviors and signals to figure out how to best approach something, right? A sales lead or whatever that is. I don't know where I read this. Maybe it was another podcast that you're in, but would you say that you've approached building this portfolio of yours in business around hey, how can we use data to better feed our way of reaching out to people and going after people and talking to them, et cetera? It's not just like you were saying, you can't expect to just close somebody by cold calling them. No way. How talk a little bit about that approach and what data means to you and your team.
I think data is really important, and especially, today we're larger than we were a couple of years ago. We own 32 storage facilities across the country. And as I mentioned, right, some of the things that were actually, what people call alpha 2 or 3 years ago, which was slap a website on and run ads, that's not alpha anymore. Everybody does it, right? So what is a true edge that you have, especially in a tough market, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people that are listening know the storage industry, but what we're up against right now as an industry is the headwinds of, hey, there's less demand from consumers to rent storage than there was a few years ago. There's increased competition in most markets because there's new supply. And like we just talked about, the average operator is more sophisticated than they were 2 or 3 years ago. And so how can you build an edge, especially knowing that all of this, there's a lot of headwinds and there's a lot of challenges in your way. So us being a little bigger now, we have to use, we would be foolish if we were not using our own data as a way to generate an edge, right? So now we have thousands and thousands of customers across the country. This lets us do a bunch of things that we couldn't do in the past. We can look at average pricing in certain markets. We can look at lengths of stay. We can look at how a certain type of customer tends to react to a rent increase. And we have a large enough sample size of customers where we can actually make definitive conclusions about, hey, if somebody is on auto pay, how do they tend to react when we do a rent increase? Or if someone lives 15 miles away from a storage facility of ours, how do they react when there's a rent increase? And not only that, we also now have a sample size to see how do different markets tend to perform in tough market conditions. Some of our markets that we're in do way, way better than others. And we can now start to see the trends across those markets. What are the common factors of these cities where our storage facilities do really, really well, even in a tough market, versus the common factors of the cities where we're kind of flat right now? And it's informed a lot of what shapes our mental model today about what are the best markets we need to be getting into, who are the type of customers that we need to be trying to draw into facilities through marketing, and then how do we execute and how do we communicate with those customers. And so 100%, I think as you get bigger, especially, and you have that larger sample size of data you can draw from, you need to draw from it, because a lot of folks that are in your markets that are smaller, they don't have that edge, right? And we talk about what are the few remaining levers or edges that you may have over others. Data is going to be a huge one of them, but knowing how to use it and unlock those insights, of course, is I think the next step our industry is going to take, right? There's not tons of tools out there yet that let the average operator figure out the answer to these questions, but I think more and more people are looking at.
I love this. The analytical data science outside of my brain is like, wanting to nerd out and make other people go to sleep when they hear us talk and whatnot. But I'd like to get like really specific on, something. So I'm going to just kind of pinpoint just a question. You take it where you want, but like, what's a system that like you built like pretty early on in the self-storage game that, you're still using today? Like, and maybe what's the evolution of that system been over the course of the last couple of years as you guys have continued to amass data and kind of learn from that system?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the one that here's one that I think we use a lot. So, Rodolfo mentioned this one. We have 32 facilities and we remote manage all of them. So that means we have no full-time staff and full-time managers at any one of our locations. Any personnel or manpower is staffed by part-time workers going 4 or 5 hours a week. We've now got like 20 plus of those people across the country. As you can imagine, it's a job that has high turnover. We're constantly hiring new folks, getting rid of other folks. And so it became a problem early on as we start to grow. How do we manage these people? How do we ensure that they're working efficiently on tasks? And how do we measure that productivity as well? When we were early on starting, it used to just be text, person number one in this city that we have these 6 turnovers we need to do. And then I'm going to call this guy in the other city and ask him to repair these few items, et cetera. So a system we built really early on. The problem we were trying to address is how do we standardize our interaction with boots on the ground folks so that we can remote manage at scale. It's easy to remote manage 1 or 2 facilities. When you got 30 of them and you have no people present on the ground, it could become a real big operational burden to run these things properly. So the first thing was, how do we standardize communication? What we built was a mobile app that people can download on their phone. It's connected to our FMS or facility management systems on the back end. And anytime we have a move out, it'll create a task in that mobile app and it'll assign it to that person. And so when one of our contractors now goes to the facility or one of our part-time employees goes to the facility, all they do is open this app, gives them a list of tasks they need to work on. They log when they start it, they log when they finish it, they take pictures of completion, they log how many hours they worked. Now we have a standard method of communicating with all of our different part-time workers, but we're also able to track productivity. How many tasks per week? How many tasks per session? What's the average time of task completion? And it tells us now, where are our weak spots? Where do we need to maybe invest in more personnel, better personnel, and to make sure that we're not missing anything. It's really, really easy, to just miss small things when you're running 32 properties with no eyes and ears there, right? And so standardizing that has been huge. We continue to adapt it. We continue to try to make it better. I think it's a huge gap in the market today that the remote management's coming so much more popular. There's not any purpose-built software to help an operator manage a facility with no personnel there. So we went and built it ourselves and we continue to refine it.
Dang, that's awesome. And now I was like, you already started answering some of the questions I had about how you're managing all those locations, right? And like, you hinted at it, but even within that, right, there's no real solution out there. Like the big question from my end, for somebody maybe that's thinking about like, hey, how is this even possible to transition into that, or at least do a hybrid, right? Like one of the number one questions that pops into my head is like, how do you keep an eye on quality? Is it, within those SOPs, like how do you ensure that your team is well prepared? Is it, do they train with you? Are you training them? Obviously, maybe you have somebody underneath that's kind of managing all that, but how do you ensure quality? How do you ensure they're set up as contractors, right? Set up for success and really bought into what you guys are building?
Yeah. It is really challenging. We struggled with it a lot early on, and it used to honestly like hurt my stomach when I slept at night. Then once we got to like 10, 15, 20 storage facilities, keep in mind, it's really difficult. You have no eyes and ears at any of them. We'd get calls from tenants. Hey, there's a mattress just sitting in the middle of this driveway. I can't get my truck around it. Hey, this gate's not working. I can't get out of your facility. And it's like 11 p.m. at night, and somebody had to call the police to get them out. I can't open the latch on this
No.
unit, or this unit's dirty. And as you continue to grow, when you don't have eyes and ears, these kind of problems fall through the cracks. And it's embarrassing if a customer is the one to point it out to you, because now you're like, hey, we did not deliver quality experience. So the way we had to start thinking about it was this. We made a list. Okay, what is the ideal state of a storage facility? If we were running a storage facility with perfect operational quality and excellence, what would be the things that were true, right? It would be clean, units would be clean, customers would have no problem getting in and out of their unit, customers would know exactly what to do when they move in and move out. And then we have to work backwards from those goals, right? Hey, if we have a goal to keep the facility clean, who needs to be responsible for it? What are the steps we need to do to ensure it? And how do we hold it accountable? So for example, in the cleanliness of the facility, we decided, hey, we need to have good security cameras at every facility. Someone on our team needs to look at those cameras 3 to 4 times a day to make sure that all drive aisles are clean, unit hallways are clean. And we need to have a system of alerting people that are local in those markets or our part-time employees to be available to handle those issues on a 24-hour notice so that we can ensure cleanliness is happening before the customer has to inform us about it. Same thing with security, right? We used to have issues where because we don't have a facility manager there, sometimes these facilities become a target for criminals or people saying, hey, there's nobody here, I can break in. So we had to work backwards. How do we make sure that doesn't happen? We had to hire people to watch our cameras, security cameras 24/7. And we installed alarms at each one of our facilities. And if there's suspicious activity, we have a person who is watching it remotely, sounds an alarm, calls the police. We'd reduced our crime by 90% almost plus doing that. So it's tough. It's a lot of work, but I think it was just starting with what's our ideal state and then trying to work backwards from there. How do we solve the problem? But third, how do we actually ensure that whatever solution we've put into place, the people that are responsible for it are going to be held accountable for those outcomes? And it is not easy. It's a lot of trial and error, but it's the only way you can make remote management work at scale is if you get obsessive about details like that.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. And, I have to ask this question because of, how fast I feel like you've grown, and set everything up very systemized, very methodical. How do you think about pacing, like growing your portfolio or even where you and the business and your business partners are going? Because like you grew fast and I feel like tempting. I think we get this a lot where we want to keep pushing and growing and whatnot. But how do you know when to go fast and when to pause and optimize and make sure things are not falling through the cracks?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so when we started buying storage facilities, interest rates were 3%. That old playbook we talked about was still working. We could buy a storage facility, do very little, increase revenue 30, 40%, and it worked. So, and again, we were new to the industry at that time. Things were working well, so we weren't stopping to always think about the downside of what happens if we can't raise rents 30%? What happens if customers are leaving at a faster pace than they're moving in? Everything was working and interest rates were low and everyone else was buying a storage facility at such a rapid pace. So we put our foot on the gas and said, let's do it too. And we had this goal. We're going to be at 100 storage facilities in 3 years. Then when the market shift and we see the same thing play out, there's a ton of groups being super aggressive at that time, pushing the pace on growth. And I think it was a good thing for us to have done that because it forced us to learn a lot. But the second thing that it did was then when the market turned and now we have these operational headwinds, now we started to see cracks in our fundamentals. We started to have stores that were underperforming, right? We started to have markets we were struggling in. That kind of forced us to say, okay, hold up, let's pull back. Why is that happening? What did we miss in our plan? We had a plan to get to 100 facilities and, execute and get, XYZ returns. Where did we go wrong? Why are we not on track for that? And it forced us to take a look and kind of understand, hey, you can't just be gas pedal all the time. There's a lot of downside you also have to look at and appreciate as you're building your plan and your growth plans, right? And some of those downside outcomes are just not worth it. It's not worth pressing the gas, to get to a certain level, but taking on so much risk along the way. And now we see the same thing. There's so many groups that were really, really large that bought a ton of storage facilities. In the last year and a half, they've been incredibly inactive. Have had to change the way that we underwrite a deal, right? Because 30, 40% rent growth in year one does not typically happen anymore. We're not underwriting those kinds of things anymore. We are not underwriting 15, 20% occupancy growth in a year like we used to experience. Having to change our underwriting to address those downside risks greatly changes the pace at which we're going to grow, right? Because in plain English, we're not paying the same level for properties that maybe we used to be willing to pay 2 years ago. We're much more conservative in how we think. We're much more conservative in what constitutes a good deal. And we know that the cost of that is we're going to be much more conservative in our growth. So for us, I think early on, the goal was, hey, let's get to 100 facilities as fast as possible. I would say today, if we think about growth, it's just how can we just be opportunistic and have a portfolio where there's no cracks, the foundation is solid, and when maybe the headwinds change, when financial markets change, when interest rates change, we are going to be in the best position to capitalize on that, because we're not going to be sitting there licking our wounds because we bought bad deals. So for us, it's not so much about like, let's grow. We have a 3-year goal. We need to get there. I think we think about growth as the moment the market presents a good opportunity, we want to position ourselves to be like one of the people that can be as aggressive as possible in that market. And for us, that means keep the foundation as strong as possible today, only buy the best of the best deals today, and get sharper at operations today. That for us, it's almost in a way of like being slow today means that we're going to be able to grow much, much faster in a few years.
I love talking about the idea of going to, 0 to 100 and stuff. And like, maybe we take a step back just for a second, right? Like, there's probably a lot of operators listening that, would love to get to the 30 plus locations that you guys have today and have the systems in place that you guys have today. If you were to start over and you had your first 3 self-storage facilities, like what's the first piece of tech you guys are putting in place? Maybe not even tech, but what's that first system you guys are putting in place to make sure that you're set up to get to the 30?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say there's just one. There's so many things that, are so important. I think a good facility management system, property management system is huge. There's a ton of them out there. And there's a bunch of new ones that do really, really great things. But basically, one, if I'm trying to just be at 2 or 3 facilities, I want to make sure, is it easy for myself to go in and manage 100, 200, 300 different tenants at one time, collect payments from them, get insights, make sure people are paying on time, see how my facilities are performing. Second thing is I want that system to be easy for customers to interact with. I want a customer to be able to rent very, very easily from my website. I want it to be super easy for a customer to make a payment. I want it to be very, very easy for a customer to remember to make their payments going forward. I think another system I'd invest in is making sure I can continue to communicate with potential customers and current customers as efficiently as possible. I know that's what you guys focus on a lot, right? Like there's now a chatbot, like Swivel does this amazing chatbot interface on the website, right? Meeting customers where they're at. And now I have a agent that can talk to customers 24/7. That's super important, I think, as a new operator, right? Making sure that you have the most efficient means of communicating with as many customers as possible and meeting them where they're at. I think those are the 2 areas out the gates I would focus on. There's so many awesome, shiny objects that I could, like you said, I could nerd out about this topic all day long. But if you're new, you don't have, $100,000 to invest in technology out the gates, those are the 2 areas. You need to make sure you know what's going on with your properties. You need to make sure your customers can interact with your properties in a very easy way. And you need to make sure you can communicate with potential and current customers as easily as possible.
Got to have a system of record that has your inventory, does your billing, and then have some type of a system that can pick up the phone, call them when they need to make a payment, send a text message, respond to their questions about the facility, et cetera. I love that. If we come back to present day, I appreciate us kind of going off topic for just a half a second, but like, you guys have gone from that 0 to 30 and now you're thinking about 30 to 100, in the next couple of years. Like, how do you think about prioritizing your time day to day? Like, what are you spending your time thinking about, and maybe break down some of your business partners as well and kind of their roles and how they're spending day-to-day operations as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have one partner in the business. Me and him founded the company together, and his focus is a lot on just our capitalization. He's looking at bringing new investors into the fold, continuing to find ways to capitalize and fund deals. And that's a big focus of his investor relations. My focus is really on the operations side, which is 2 things for us: continue to find new storage facilities that meet our acquisition criteria to purchase, and continue running the ones we have in the most optimal way possible. Those 2 buckets is where I spend all of my time. How can we find and hunt the next deal? And how can we get sharper and smarter about identifying and getting to that next deal as quick as possible? I think there's a stat, I forget what it is. There's 50,000 plus storage facilities. I think that number might be like 70,000 or something. I think nobody probably knows what the number actually is, but how can we wade through those 70,000?
Industry statistics say about 55 to 60. And I think you're right. You think about I'm in the North Georgia mountains right now. And it's like, I can't drive without seeing one that is definitely not on those lists,
Exactly. Yeah. There's a ton of really good tools that I think are amazing, that'll say, hey, look, here's a given market and here's all the storage facilities in it. But sometimes I go to those markets, like you said, drive through the mountains and you're going to see like 5 facilities that are not on anyone's software. So it's anyone's guess how many are out there. But our job in acquisitions is how do we wade through those 60,000 as quick as possible to identify the 200 or 300 that are going to be really good fits for us, and we have a high probability of actually closing. And so that's a big part of my job, is how do we sift through everything that's out there to try to find our best chances of acquiring a storage facility. And on the operations side, the biggest things we focus on today is just how can we drive more rental activity? How can we become more visible in our markets? How can we maximize our chances of converting a lead when it comes to us? My biggest focus today area is exactly that, top of funnel and then right below top of funnel. How can we get as many people to know about us and rent from us? And when they do approach us and interact with us, how can we have like as high of a chance as possible to make sure that they do actually rent a unit with us and don't go somewhere else?
Awesome. I appreciate that insight.
On my end, I'm curious, like you've mentioned a lot, the customer experience, right? I think it's huge. Like knowing that you guys are so tech centric as a business, I think you've put a lot of emphasis on the importance of people within it all as well. And I'm curious, being remotely managed, going to the people on your team that actually are the ones interacting with your customers, right? To provide that excellent customer experience. Was there anything that you did or you learned over the last few years in training or maybe incentivizing these folks to really buy into the culture that you're wanting to build and be able to represent Iron Storage well?
Yeah, 100%. I think when I very first started and I bought that first storage facility, I was actually doing everything. I was the customer service rep. I was the one, if you called our facility, I would answer the phone. I would process your payment. I would process your move in. I was also the boots on the ground. That facility was an hour away from me. So I would drive to the facility, clean units myself, do turnovers. And then I was handling investors. I was handling, bank financing. I was doing everything. I think that exercise helped tremendously because it's a people-centric business, like you said, right? We are at a given facility of hundreds and hundreds of customers. And, may not be a big deal to you, any one of them, but when you have to sit on the phone and hear a customer express concerns to you about the safety of their items or an experience that they had, it actually becomes more meaningful. So I would encourage everyone to do that because it kind of forces you to think about how do you actually communicate and treat customers with respect and give them the experience that they want to have. I think taking that and then, how do we, and this is a tough part for any business owner in any industry. Okay, I know how I want to do something in my head. How do I now take that out of my head and download that to the rest of my team and make them want to be bought in and work the same way? I think the two things that have worked the best in getting the team to really buy in to running our facilities a certain way is one, trying to not like overprescribe. We used to do these call scripts. Used to be like, hey, when a new customer gets on the phone or potential, just read this bullet point list and you're going to be fine. I think it just made people feel, it was really robotic, of course. But second, I think if you're a customer service rep on our team and all you're trained to do is read a script, your critical thinking part of your brain turns off. And that's not what we want to happen. So what we've done now is instead we just train on outcomes. Hey, we want you to try to get the customer to here. We give you a bunch of tools. Hey, we want you to get the customer to a rental. If you need to, offer them this promotion. If you need to, offer them this promotion. If you need to, tell them we'll match the price of the nearest facility. If you need to, offer them XYZ. Here are the tools. Here's the outcome. I want you to figure it out. Right. And of course, we do training and we do provide parameters. But now when a call happens, the critical thinking part of their brain is on. Right. And now when we listen to those calls, we see them more engaged. We see them more personable because they are invested in trying to get to that goal. But the second part of that then is how do we even get our customer service rep to care about that goal of getting a rental or keeping a customer happy? And that is incentives. We give probably 30% of our customer service team's compensation comes from bonuses, right? We heavily bonus them on all sorts of things. Every 5-star Google review that comes in, they're going to get paid for it. Every facility where we meet a certain collections challenge, if we have less than a certain percentage delinquency at a given facility, they get a bonus. If we hit a certain number of rentals, they get a bonus. A big one we just started is conversion percentage. Hey, if we get 10 phone calls and you guys convert at least 6 of them into new rentals, 60%, you guys are going to get a bonus. And by doing that and giving them a lot of control over how to get there, here's the tools, here's the outcome. You figure out how to do it, and I'm going to pay you for getting to that outcome. We now have a team of people whose culture is let's be locked in. Let's trade best practices with each other, because if we really nail this, we're all going to get paid. And moving to that model has drastically improved results across the board for us. So I think just, hire good people, give them the tools they need, and pay them really, really well to get to those outcomes. And you're going to be surprised about what happens.
I want to double click just really quickly on the kind of like what I would consider like this operator's playbook, this the flexibility or the tools that you're giving your agents in order to close something, right? Like how detailed is that? And like, is this like do you guys have different playbooks per facility depending on the market that it's in, or is it kind of just a generalized, hey, a rule of thumb, yes, you're allowed to price match, yes, you're allowed to give a 20% discount? Like how detailed are you guys getting in that?
Yeah, it's a really, actually, it's a tough challenge, right? Because in a perfect world, I would love to have rules tailor made to every facility to say, to make sure we're running each facility as optimally as possible. But the reality is that's 32 sets of rules that my customer service team would then have to remember, right? So the tough part is we want to balance having the most optimal process with having a really easy to implement process. And those two things can come at odds really, really often. Again, it kind of goes back to rather than be over prescriptive, rather than say, here are the 100 rules and here's the 5 exceptions for this facility, we try to just have general outcomes. We try to provide general rules. And then I have 1 or 2 managers on the customer service team and across all lines of business. We have 1 or 2 managers that I have a high degree of trust in, that I spend a ton of time with them. So they think in a really similar way to how I would think. And I tell the rest of the team, if you're just not sure, if there's a gray area, if you're not sure whether to offer a price match, if you're not sure whether to offer this promotion, just ask the manager. And I just tell the managers, I will trust and live and die with the decision that you make. So there has to be a little bit of delegating or critical thinking. There has to be, again, a lot of alignment in how you think. But rather than try to say, here's 100 sets of rules, it's just do what you think is best. If you're not sure, ask the manager. They're going to tell you what they think is best. And I'm going to live and die with what that manager says. And 95% of the time that works out just well. But the benefit of doing it that way is it's a really easy system to implement. And I can now count on people to implement it in the way I want.
It's such a good example. I mean, obviously an AI platform is what we build, and we're looking at automating as much as we possibly can. But like since day zero, we've wanted it to be human in the loop, and people always kind of ask like around this types of interactions that are like human. And like what you just said is like such a human thing, like critically think, I trust you, you understand our ethos. It's like something that we can't do across 32 facilities, completely customized, etc. That's just such a good example of like where you're humanizing still the business, even if we're putting systems in place to try to, serve customers with gate codes and automate bill payments, et cetera, et cetera. I'd love to, ask you earlier, like around what your day to day and your work environment looks like. I'd like to step out of that and kind of get into, who you are outside of work just for a half second. And, what's a good day look like for you outside of work? And then kind of a secondary question to that is like, what are some non-negotiable habits? We're all grinding, we're all pushing, growing the business. Like non-negotiables, I need to do this, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, to make sure that you're grounded and, showing up as the best version of yourself every single day for yourself and your business partners.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. I love it. First of all, I'll just say I'm super boring outside of work. I've got 2 young kids, a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so it's spending time with them. I've got an amazing wife that stays at home with the kids and does a much, much harder job than me. So if I have free time, I want to make sure they're all doing good. They're okay. And for anyone that has young kids, you know how it goes, right? Your life is just all your activities revolve around them for the most part, which I love. It's a huge blessing. But one thing I learned the hard way when starting the business, and I talk to a lot of business owners, and you all can probably relate. There's a big grind mentality these days with younger entrepreneurs, especially. Like, I'm going to give every single ounce of everything that's inside of me to this business. Sometimes that is required, right? There's no way around that. When I first started my business, it was 10, 12-hour days, 7 days a week. And I probably did that for the first 2 years. And I don't think we would have made it and done what we did had I not done that and had, partners not done that. So there's sometimes where it's required. But what I definitely want people to be cautious of coming to what are my non-negotiables is, are we just doing that because there's a culture around it, or we're just bought to believe that, hey, you must, if you're not giving 100% of everything in your body and soul to the business, you're not going to succeed. I think that's counterproductive today, right? There's sometimes
we glorify that, right? Like especially as in American society, like the entrepreneurs that don't sleep, that wake up at 4 a.m. Like we glorify that so much. And the reality is that that's not really how it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you need to show up for a decade, not 2 years, right?
Exactly. I mean, so those first 2 years, I was eating fast food. I was not sleeping. I was pounding energy drinks every single day. I was not going to the gym, because going to the gym means that's time I'm not working, right? Cooking a meal means that's time I'm not working. Caffeine in my system means I'm as productive as possible. And looking back on it, I think that was so counterproductive. I think I was not showing up as the best version of myself every single day. I had very little mental clarity. I was stressed out all the time. Forget, being a good business partner and being a good leader. I wasn't showing up as a good husband or a good father, at least to the best of my abilities, I don't think. And what I've found, which is now non-negotiable for me, is even if I'm spending less hours at work, if I'm healthy, if I'm going to the gym, if I'm eating clean, if I'm giving myself a little mental space to de-stress, spending time with family, yes, I may be cutting my hours down by 30%, 35%. I'm not a grinder anymore, but the hours I am working are probably 2x as productive as they used to be. I'm getting so much more done. The business is growing faster. My impact on the business is greater, and I'm doing that with less time in the business. There are times where you have to grind, but the message I would really want to get across some of the non-negotiables are is you can't take care of your business until you take care of yourself first. And it's really important to watch your health as a new business owner, watch your practices, just to make sure that, hey, don't grind for the sake of it. That's not the most productive thing 95% of the time.
Along those lines too, I'm just curious, do you draw inspiration from anywhere in particular, or maybe somebody, entrepreneur, or a book, even experiences that kind of have really shaped how you run Iron Storage and Pebble Ridge, and even as a father, anywhere that you're taking inspiration from nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. I think there's a reason we love grind culture, right? Because a lot of the most inspirational people did really grind and sacrifice a ton, right? I take inspiration from athletes all the time, for example, right? Hey, the folks who are the most dedicated to their craft, who pay the most attention to detail, are going to be the ones that succeed, right? And I think that's something that applies in business as well. There's no shortcuts, there's no way to avoid attention to details. There's a ton of people in the storage industry. There's a lot of great operators out there that I think I get the benefit of talking to and learning from and having conversations with. And just to hear how some other people think about their business is always huge for me. So yeah, I think 100%. Honestly, even folks like yourself, I'll be honest with you, right? Like I'll talk to you guys. I'll see the way you guys are growing and how quick Swivel is growing. And I go on other storage facility websites all the time. I'm like, oh my God, they're using Swivel. They're using Swivel. And that's inspirational to me. I'm like, look at how quick they're growing. So 100%. I think anyone who is out there showing results, doing it the right way, you'll find inspiration in 100 different places. I wish I had a cool answer. My real answer is like, I don't know. I take inspiration from LeBron and Kobe and people like that a lot. And I watch their videos and hype myself up and 100%. But I'll draw inspiration from almost anywhere.
You got a handful of LeBron stands on the podcast. It's actually,
yeah.
For everybody that doesn't know, it's actually like the initial thing that Rodolfo and I bonded over before we founded a company together, was like just watching LeBron James and the Cavaliers go on there. Was that the 2018 run?
Yes.
Rodolfo?
2016.
Yeah. 2016. So even a little earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think
you gotta love watching greatness in general.
That's exactly it. I don't understand people, not to digress too much. Like, I hate Tom Brady. I hate LeBron. How can you hate greatness? I just don't understand it. Don't have to be somebody is out there doing something at the highest level for 10 to 20 years. That is what we all want to do as well, right? So how can you not draw inspiration from that? But anyways, before we get too deep into the LeBron topic, I'll stop myself.
I mean, I'll shout out Taylor Swift too. Kobe even gave her flowers,
Rodolfo's been waiting for 30 some odd podcasts to bring Taylor Swift onto the podcast.
That's hilarious.
Game recognizes game.
I agree with that too. Shoot, I wish I could do anything half as good as Taylor Swift does what she does, right? So results speak for themselves. I agree. Take inspiration from Taylor Swift. There's 100 people. There's 1 million people to go take inspiration from. I'm with you.
That's awesome. Well, I think we'd like to do kind of a rapid fire at the end, and some quick questions and stuff, and I'll kick it off with just one that's kind of in line with some of the stuff we were just talking about. Are you a morning or a night owl? Morning person,
night owl these days. Morning is tough when you have young kids. You wake up and you're just thrown into the chaos, and then you just spit back out in a car and you get to work, and that's what a morning is, with young kids. So night, it definitely have to be a night owl for sure.
That's awesome. We already kind of touched on some books and stuff like that, but I'm curious, like podcast, movie, something you've like really enjoyed recently, maybe it changed the way that you thought about something.
There's a audiobook I listened to recently. It's called Pitch Anything by a guy named Warren Clamp. I actually read the book a long time ago, but I just re-listened to it recently. Awesome book for anyone, honestly, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you work at a job. To keep it real quick, the book is just about, hey, this is how the human brain works. You will come and deliver this amazing pitch, slide deck, tons of data, and you expect that the way you're pitching it is the way the recipient's brain is processing it, right? But there's a way that people process information. We have certain attention spans. We have parts of our brain that says, this is not relevant information, I'm going to throw it out. It's parts of our brain that say, this is really interesting, I'm going to hook onto it. And the book is just about when you are communicating with somebody or selling something, how can your pitch be optimized to hit the parts of the brain of the recipient to make sure they remember it, they latch on to the words you say, and how to avoid pitching in a way where it's coming in one ear, coming out the other ear. And there's a bunch of neuropsychology around it. Sounds like a really, really nerdy book. It's written really, really well in plain English. Being in a tech sales background previously and now today being in a position where I'm pitching investors or pitching employees and pitching people all the time, it just drastically changed the way that I think about, hey, this is how I need to be talking and communicating. It'll make anybody a sharper communicator. So I can't speak highly enough about that.
All right, my last one, then I'll let Rodolfo come in. But you've got to pick 5 apps on your phone. What are your 5 apps?
Oh man, I mean, it's gonna be a Gmail, Google Chat, Google this, Google that. No, I think
Just give me the Google Suite
yeah,
and I'm good to go.
yeah, exactly. No, but one I love as well. I mean, man, go pay for YouTube Premium if you don't already. I've learned when before I got into storage, I want to say 70-80% of what I learned came from YouTube. Even to this day, if there's a topic I need to learn more about, data analysis, for example, or cold outreach to, real estate prospects, YouTube is a university. So go pay the $15 and get YouTube Premium.
Kyle's gonna put the horns in post edit, just to make sure people are listening to that one. I know he loves some YouTube Premium.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice. I love that. I looked up that book. Definitely want to check that out. So thanks for the recommendation.
Don't even have to wait for post.
There you go.
Oh, wait. Yeah, we're gonna need to work on these. Definitely sprinkle them in. No, that's awesome. And Faraz, this is awesome. So many good nuggets in this episode. Can't wait to re-listen to it. Can't wait for folks in the audience to be able to listen to it wherever they listen to podcasts. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Before we sign off, Faraz, where can people find you, man?
I'm on LinkedIn, Faraz Hemani. I'm on Twitter. You can find me anywhere. Find me on LinkedIn, message me. I try my best to respond to everything. I'll get on a call. I'd love to talk to anybody interested or thinking about storage or business.
Awesome.
Man, thanks so much for the time today, dude. It was a pleasure to get inside of your head a little bit.
No, I loved it. Thank you so much.